Have you ever wished that Dark Souls was less about dodge rolling and more about dodging roly-polies? If so, you're in for a treat because in today's humble opinion, we're getting nailed in Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is a game with adorable bugs that could make even the most phobic of people learn to conquer their— wait, what the fuck is that? Oh, holy shit, what the fuck? Hollow Knight is a game that reminds us of our need to cleanse the world in eternal hellfire, and if the creatures you bump into don't make you feel that way, the rigorous combat and controller-breakingly maddening platforming sections certainly will. Even though it's definitely your fault. Yes, even that time you swear it wasn't, because the game is essentially flawless. Sure, there are minor annoyances like going long distances and dying only to realize that you didn't rest at a more nearby bench, but I mean, whose fault is that? The game is relentlessly hard, but it's fair. That being said, it knows its way around a difficult curve that manages to be both simultaneously steep and subtle. It begins easy enough, but confronts you with challenging foes from, well, not much further in. Of course, that is, unless you're looking back on the challenges and realizing that they were nothing compared to what you're facing currently, and you didn't even realize how far you'd come. It's the sort of difficulty that lets the player slip into the mystery of the world while still being omnipresent, which isn't something we see very often. Speaking of the world, it's phenomenal. Everything from the lore to the characters to the environments feels well thought out and executed. I think what sells it the most is the fact that each inclusion was specifically chosen to carry a purpose or intent. Every character carries a story, every item has a history, every enemy has a series of events that made it what it unfortunately now is. The game successfully weaves a tangible narrative tapestry that gives the game a sense of life, but it also doesn't sacrifice any of the shrouded mystery or wonder of the world. It has seemingly infinite loose ends, as if our tapestry were frayed around the edges. Just like in the real world, where you can't possibly know everything, the game has a very detailed focal point that you spend the entirety of your time in, but you get the sense that it's larger than your experience. The controls likewise are finely tuned. Everything feels as if it happens exactly when you press the button, except for when your reflexes are a millisecond too slow to respond and it feels like it's not your fault. Or when your reflexes are a millisecond too fast and you haven't actually made contact with a wall to jump off of it yet, so it feels like it's not your fault. The jumping, I find, is especially satisfying since as soon as you let go of the button, the knight begins his descent. Then the slashing of your nail happens in what feels like a single frame, giving you the instant response you need to deal with the constant pressure of potentially being fucked over at any moment. That doesn't mean there aren't going to be parts of the game that you feel are cheap or impossible, but those are the points that I would say to give it a break and come back to it with a fresh mind, because neither of those is the case. And once you actually beat those segments, it is ridiculously gratifying. One of my favorite parts about the game is how easy it was to get lost in the world, both figuratively in the sense that it's beautiful and full of wonder, but also in its size and its twisting and turning caverns. I guess you could say that it's also full of wander. It's entirely possible that before moving on to the area that it obviously thinks you should go, you accidentally fall your ass into the nightmare hellscape. Did I mention that this game is actually a sleeper survival horror hit? Because Jesus fucking born as Jason Christ, there's some right scary shit down here. And somehow you have to circumnavigate your way back to sanity the hard way. That little accident was how I truly fell in love with the game. The environments are so varied and beautiful in their own haunting ways, from the austerity of the ancient basin to the deserted dirt mouth, from the melancholy of the City of Tears to the crystal peak with its maddening caverns. There's always that sense of enigmatic compilation that lures you ever onward, hungering for the fulfillment that comes with mastering the game and learning its secrets. Despite running into a huge number of bugs in my playthrough, I have to give Hollow Knight a perfect 10 out of 10 because while I'm sure there's plenty of room for the developers to improve, I'm hard pressed to find a single goddamn thing wrong with it. The worst it did was make me confront my own frustration because I simply wasn't doing what I needed to do properly, and knowing this as I played, it helped me work out the nuances of the problems. I saw where my timing was off and where my expectations were flawed. A notable example of this was any platforming section that required me to wall jump up a wall and then jump over from the wall without touching the spikes on top. The motion in these movements was pretty tricky to get the hang of, and I muttered quite a few expletives trying to get the hang of it, but once I did, I felt fantastic. Likewise, some boss fights will feel unfair and oppressive until you focus on learning the behaviors, patterns, and tells. The Soul Master was the first fight I actually died several times trying to beat. Between the teleportation, the dives, and the projectiles, I was convinced that it was utter bullshit, but it wasn't. I came back later with a clear head and figured it out, so it actually wasn't too hard. Even some of the lesser enemies can put up a similar struggle, but it's those small windows of opportunity that make fights feel intense and highlight your skills as a player. And it's with a calm mind and a clear head that you can tackle any problem the first time through with enough observation, experimentation, and formulation. They never give you a problem that you're unable to handle. They believe in you, it's just a matter of whether you believe in yourself. Thank you everyone for watching, and special thanks to Team Cherry for all of the time and effort they put into making this masterpiece of a game. I knew it was going to be amazing from that sneak peek I got to play through way back in an earlier bundle, and I can't overstate how grateful I am to actually have my own copy, finally. Never got the time to buy it and play it, and now that I have it, I've put a little too much time into playing it when I should have been working on this review and a few others. It's positively magic. Until next time, remember that failure is not the worst case scenario. To go on with your bad selves and stay awesome.